our study. It's called The Words and Ways of Jesus. And I want to begin it with a question. What would your community look like if you organized your community around the values of Jesus? If you made his values your values? You know, I think about it all the time, and I wonder what would the church look like? How would it change if we Christians really believed that Jesus meant for us to do the things he said? What if we made his values our values? So the first step, I think, is to discern those values and then evaluate how are we aligning our values with his. The first value I'd like for us to look at is his value of relationships. Jesus valued relationships, friendship. He loved God and he loved people. when we look at the types of people or the types of relationships that Jesus invested in, I think we discern like three friendship networks. One of those is his relationship with God, whom he called Father. Jesus spent a lot of time nurturing his friendship with God. He spent time on retreats. Before he made big decisions, he would spend the night in prayer. Before he began his public ministry, he spent 40 days in the desert, in the wilderness, alone with God. And he taught us to love God with all our heart, with all our soul, with all our mind and strength. He said it was the greatest commandment. The second friendship network that Jesus invested in was the folks who followed him, and he called them his family. If you take a look at that group of folks that followed Jesus, you're going to see that he loved diversity, and he invited all kinds of characters into his circle of friends. There's John the Baptist, who was just kind of this eccentric religious fellow. There was political and zealots. There were ordinary men and women, fishermen. There were even wealthy folks who followed Jesus. There were tax collectors, and he even invited a thief into his group. And Jesus loved them all, and he invested into this diverse circle of friends. There was one occasion when Jesus was teaching in a house, and the house was filled with people. And the scripture story says that his mother and his brother came to take charge of him. Now, I think that means they thought he had lost his ever-loving mind, that he was maybe mentally ill, or maybe the rumors that the Pharisees and the religious leaders were saying about him, maybe they were true. Maybe Jesus' power and the way he was doing miracles were somehow demonic or something. Anyway, I think maybe they were just embarrassed, and so they came to take charge of him. And the house was so filled they couldn't get inside. And somebody come and told Jesus, your mom is here and your brothers are here. And Jesus said this. He said, my mother and my brothers are those who do the will of God. I imagine, I can see Jesus kind of looking around the room at this diverse group of folks. And he just said, this is my family. He blew his thought of family. It went way beyond bloodline. It went way beyond national boundaries. Jesus was very inclusive, and he included all kinds of folks into his family. And he spent time nurturing that family and loving the family of God. Now, there's this third relationship network, and it's the folks that are really far from the church, people who were pushed to the margins of society. I think of them as those who were forgotten and overlooked. Jesus called them the least of these, and he identified with them so much that he said, when you love someone or do something good for the least of these, you've done it to me. Jesus definitely had a preference for the poor, and he loved to spend proximity with the poor. Jesus loved those folks who were on the margin and forgotten by those in the center of society. So there's the three relationship networks. Jesus loved his Father, he loved his family, and he loved those who were forgotten. It's not really all that earth shattering that Jesus loved people and he loved God and he put a priority on relationships. But I think it becomes grist for the mill for us in our conversation of how to organize our communities around the values of Jesus when we realize Jesus put equal priority on all three of those relationships. It was Mike Breen in his book, Building a Discipleship Culture, that observed that most churches, most local churches or communities of faith will do a really good job at investing in one or two of these relationship networks. But few of us have the capacity or will value all three relationships equally. I would like for us to pause for a moment and just think about the three relationship networks and then ask yourself, how are you, or how is your community doing in loving all three? How are you loving God? How are you loving the family of God? And how are you loving those who are forgotten and pushed to the margins?